Mullvad's co-owner made a controversial political donation. A U.S. court has ruled border agents can search your phone without a warrant, and a little bit of good news from Apple. All this and more coming up in This Week in Privacy number 63, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to This Week in Privacy, our weekly series where we discuss the latest updates with what we're working on within the Privacy Guides community and this week's top stories in data privacy and cybersecurity. I'm Jonah, and with me this week is Nate. By the way, we're going to be ditching our Q&A section we normally have at the end in favor of answering questions just throughout the stream, so if you have any, no need to wait, just ask away. We will be checking the chat here, of course, and also our forum thread and our Signal chat for Privacy Guides supporters. So any of those places, let us know if you want us to discuss anything. Anyways, how are you doing today, Nate?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, I don't think I have much to say. It's just it's been a surprisingly good week, I think, for me. How are you?
Good. You know, I'm doing good as well. I was just talking to some people. I know you know about this, but this morning I booked all of my stuff for DEF CON in a few weeks. Kind of a last minute booking, which is how I normally handle things. But that'll be exciting. So if anyone is going to DEF CON, it would be very cool to meet up with anyone. But otherwise, I will be doing that. And I'm looking forward to it. I've never been to Vegas before. Have you been to Vegas, Nate?
Surprisingly, no. I actually spent 7 years in Southern California, and Vegas was only a few hours away. But for the majority of that time, I was under 21, and a lot of people told me that, like, yeah, there's stuff to do if you're not 21, but there's like, and they're not even talking about gambling, which is like getting into places. Like, there's more stuff to do when you are 21. So I just never really made the time. But that is really exciting. I do want to go to DEF CON one day, so I hope you have fun.
Yeah, you should come. Hopefully we can do it next year or something a bit less last minute for sure.
Yeah, that would be super awesome. But yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and jump into this week's stories and cybersecurity stuff that you might be discussing at DEF CON, possibly. Who knows? But we're going to start with our big story, which is about Mullvad, the Mullvad donation controversy. So for context here, this actually came to light a few weeks ago. I want to say like a month ago, that one of the co-founders of Mullvad VPN, named Daniel Berntsen, I probably pronounced that wrong, donated, I believe some sources I've found said 5 million Swedish kroner, which is a little bit north of 500,000 US dollars, to, I'm definitely going to pronounce this wrong, the Orebro Party in Sweden. According to Wikipedia, this party has been described as both left and right wing. But from what I can tell, they're largely considered left wing. And unfortunately, this is relevant to the story. Despite being considered largely left wing, the party apparently also has some significant nationalist, populist, and conservative views. And one of the big ones that I've seen thrown around a lot that people are upset about is remigration, which is a term I've never heard before, but the summary I found said it's a policy aimed at encouraging or compelling immigrants to leave Sweden. Another summary said the party's platform includes strong secularism, immediate closure of Islamic charter schools, and the assertion that Sweden belongs to the Swedes. So again, for the record, these are summaries I read, and I have never been to Sweden. I am not Swedish. I don't think I know any Swedes, other than I think I've talked to some of the Mullvad people for like 2 seconds in the past. So apologies if I got any of that wrong, but that is what my research turned up. So again, this story started about, I mean, apparently this donation took place in 2025, but I guess it just came to light about a month ago. And Mullvad has officially commented now because this has become such a big thing. And I'm just going to kind of pick out bits and pieces of this story because there is it's not a huge statement, but you know, it's a little bit too much to just read off here. Basically, they said this is a private donation from Daniel to the individual. Mullvad or its parent and sister companies did not endorse and were not involved in it. And then they kind of went on to basically say that, well, actually, let me scroll down a little bit here and read one more part. Mullvad does not condone it nor condemn it. It was most likely a bad idea. Most things where there are a multitude of conflicting opinions necessarily are. I don't know about that. But societies need a great diversity of ideas, initiatives, and organizations who can be tested and sifted until the best ones remain, ideally through rational debate. Daniel's rationale and points of view can be read on his personal blog, which I'll throw up on screen real quick just so you guys can see it. He has written quite a bit, actually, about a number of his views, both related to that party specifically and politics. So you guys can go read that if you'd like to. Just to clarify, when I said I don't know about that, they said the part where most things where there are a multitude of conflicting opinions necessarily are. I mean, there have been a lot of controversial ideas in the past that I would argue have stood the test of time, but whatever. So basically they go on to say in this post, to kind of summarize it, they basically say like Mullvad is nonpartisan. Their interest is in making a VPN and providing people with the tools to bypass censorship and access information and communicate freely and privately. And they kind of point out like sometimes, you know, we talk about this with like encryption. Like necessarily people unfortunately are going to use encryption to do bad things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we break everybody's encryption, right? And that's kind of the same argument that they're taking. And let me see if I've got it all down here. So yeah, Daniel, like I said, Daniel's got his own blog post over here. I'll be honest, I had a little bit of a hard time following his logic. I mean, it is a lot. And I tried to read it all. Again, I'm not Swedish, so I think maybe some of the context escaped me. I also, if I can be a little bit sarcastic down here, he says, disclaimer, the views in this text, while partially inspired by the two who founded that party, are mine and not theirs or the party's. And it's like, so basically you said, here's why I voted for the party. And by the way, nothing I said is what the party said. So I don't really understand what he's saying there. I kind of do, but I kind of don't. Anyways, if I read his blog correctly, he's basically saying like, he doesn't really believe in that party, but he, again, could be reading this wrong, but he's kind of like trying to encourage competition. Like maybe if we have more viable party options, maybe the existing politicians will do better. Which as somebody living under a two-party system, I can say I kind of understand that logic, but I don't know how well it holds up. But yeah, I think that's I think that kind of gets us up to speed. I think I'm going to throw it back to Jonah at this point to kick off the analysis. Jonah, could you maybe start by kind of like why has this become? I think it's probably obvious for most people, but just in case anybody's wondering, like why has this become such a hot topic in the community? Do you think?
You know, I think well, in terms of why it became a hot topic, I think that the privacy community in general is a fairly political community because obviously we are fighting for privacy, digital rights. A lot of that has to do with not only, you know, getting privacy from big tech companies, but also having privacy from the government and making sure that the laws of, you know, where you live are protecting your privacy rights. And we talk about privacy policies and law on our forum and on this channel all of the time. And I don't think any of the policies that this party has are specifically privacy related, although there are certainly some privacy implications with some of the remigration stuff that they're doing, which is a whole separate topic. But it's not surprising to me that that people who have an interest in privacy are also going to have an interest in a lot of other political topics. And so it's definitely controversial because it's the sort of thing that is going to blow up on social media. We've seen a ton of this talked about on Mastodon and on Twitter, and I'm sure on other platforms where Mullvad is as well. Obviously, Mullvad was feeling the pressure because they had to post a full response about it. And I think a lot of people just have questions about what it means for Mullvad, especially if they don't feel like supporting these policies. And so we could take a look at some of the questions. We've received questions just during this show already, and some statements. We could look at Take Out the Lobster on YouTube said it's not really an extreme party, if that's what you're getting at. Sincerely, a Swede. I will say neither of us are Swedish, obviously. I mean, maybe ancestrally, but not living in Sweden. I have no familiarity with Swedish politics, and I assume Nate does not really either. So I don't really know much about this party, to be honest, and they seem to be all over the map. I don't think the question is, how extreme they are, but they do seem to be, from what I've gathered and from what other people have said, just a very populist party, which is the sort of thing where a lot of the times with these populist parties, they will have a lot of policies and say a lot of things mainly to get votes and support more than like actually supporting it. And they might not even believe any of the things that they're supporting, or they only have certain policies that they care about. I think that this is a big problem with some parties, that especially ones that are described as both right and left wing, like this one is, like Nate was saying, because in a lot of cases, when a party seems like they are kind of on all sides of the aisle, they're actually only supporting one side, but they want to get votes from anyone that they can convince. I don't really know where. I don't really know. I guess at the end of the day, his support for it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. He said in his own blog post that he doesn't really support many of the policies that this party supports. So I don't know why. I think it was at the end there, if you have it on the screen, Nate. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to become that party's biggest supporter. But again, I don't know how much this competition is really needed in the Swedish political space. A lot of the questions that I've seen are more about like just how much of Mullvad's money is actually going to the causes that the co-founder supports. And as far as I know, Mullvad is basically co-owned 50-50 between him and another person. And they're co-CEOs, and they kind of just split everything down the middle. And so I don't know, Nate, you could probably elaborate more on this a bit, but in terms of like whether you should continue using Mullvad or not, it's less of a like privacy or a technical decision and more of like a philosophical or political how you feel. At the end of the day, like your money, if you support Mullvad, some of that is going to be supporting these things that one of the co-founders cares about because he's getting the profits from Mullvad, right? Even if Mullvad's not directly doing it, you're sending money that way, which is something to consider. But at the same time, you can separate the art from the artist. And if Mullvad isn't directly supporting it themselves, it's just one guy who's profiting off of it. Maybe that's less of a big deal to you. I don't know. What do you think, Nate?
I think it's really personal preference. Real quick, just to kind of go back to what Take Out the Lobster said. What I was getting at is basically just that I just wanted to, I don't know if hedge my bets is the right word, but basically, like, I don't know a lot about this party. I hadn't really heard of them before. So it was kind of my, like, I wasn't trying to insinuate they're necessarily an extreme party. I was more just saying, like, I apologize if I'm summarizing this wrong. But yeah, I think it's so tricky because I think both of those takes are true. Etter Yu said here that he said in a real fight, nobody drops the best shield just because they dislike the creator. But at the same time, I think it's not quite the same. Like, I see where you're coming from, and you're absolutely right. Like, if I was in a firefight, I'm going to use whatever protection I have available to cover myself. But it's so, like, I don't know. I think that's a valid take, but at the same time, I think not wanting to, because when you're subscribing to Mullvad, you are directly putting money in this man's pocket, like, full stop. You are, period, full stop. And so you're giving money to him, which he then in turn turns around and gives to a party that may have serious, like, political things that you don't believe in. If he's talking about forcibly removing immigrants from the country, and like maybe that's something you don't believe. Maybe, I mean, like, my wife is Hispanic. I don't like people. I'm just gonna say it here in the US. I don't like people who have that whole, like, oh, we need to kick them all out. Like, it's, I don't know, man. I think they're both valid takes is what I'm getting at. Like, if you're like, no, it's the best tool we have, it's his money, And I don't think we're going to find a better tool. I think that is a perfectly valid take. But I also think it's completely reasonable that some people would be like, yeah, but my money is directly supporting him, which is in turn directly supporting them. So it's basically like I'm giving money to them, but just through a proxy.
Mhm.
And I don't want to give them my money. Like, I think that's also a perfectly valid take. Um, Personal opinion, I think I would like to see in the community itself, I think I would like to see more appreciation for that. I think not to like kind of be judgy and call people out, but this whole like you said again this comment, this Mullvad drama shows how people confuse politics with engineering. No, like technology is political. I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm one of those people who thinks that everything is political when you dig deep enough, and there's really no such thing as being non-political or apolitical. And so it's like I think understanding that for some people this is really important to them, and I think that's valid, and just having that kind of patience that for some people they care, for some people they don't. So
And this is
I don't
something
know.
that comes up a lot, I think, most of the time when like people say that they're not going to use something that's widely recommended, like Mullvad, we see it with Graphene OS, for example. We see it with other projects. We see it with Proton all the time, where I think when somebody says like they're not going to use something for some non-technical reason, there's a group of people who get mad that they're doing that and that they're not using it, which is a reaction that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like if somebody isn't going to use Mullvad because of this, I don't think there needs to be a whole argument about why, the politics and how this doesn't actually matter because Mullvad is still secure. Like it's fine if you don't want to financially support this sort of thing. Um, but yeah, just kind of an annoying thing that's I've seen in the community beyond Mullvad stuff. I would say the other thing I wanted to point out really quick, I did see a lot of comments in the community basically talking about the potential privacy implications for some of these policies. The remigration one in particular, it does call into question um, a lot of privacy concerns about how those people would be found in Sweden, for example, and how they are, determining who needs to stay and who's going to leave. What metrics are they using? Obviously, here in the United States, we've seen a lot of news about ICE, for example, and how they're using facial recognition everywhere, and they all have these apps on their phones that they can scan people with, and all of this data is being collected into databases. All of those immigration policies and some of the stuff that this party is supporting can directly have privacy implications for people living in Sweden. And obviously, we've seen already, maybe it's not obvious, but in the US, people who are not targeted by these policies, like American citizens who were born here in whatever, um, are also swept up in these privacy invasive things that the government is doing. And it's very possible that if policies like this were implemented in Sweden, a similar sort of thing would happen where, it's not only going to be targeting illegal immigration, but also it's going to sweep up uh, Swedish citizens into this whole immigration system. And a lot of people, I think, will probably be opposed to that just from a privacy perspective as well. I did see a lot of comments about that on the forum, so I did want to bring it up because I do think a lot of people are saying like, well, there's no privacy implications at all. So if you only care about privacy, it doesn't matter too much, right? Um,
Yeah.
let's
I mean,
see.
there's so many questions and comments on this one. Let's
I
take a
know.
couple
Let's
from Jordan's been relaying some from the Signal chat.
yeah.
Let's start with some of these. So, how is the co-owner? I think you answered this. How is the co-owner invested in Mullvad financially? If I pay for Mullvad, and what way I pay him? Well, first of all, I think you said they're 50-50 owners, but
That
also like I want to point out he draws a paycheck
that's my
directly from Mullvad.
understanding.
So
I don't know how that aspect of it works because there's when you own a company, and Mullvad is a private company, so like all of this stuff is not going to be it doesn't have to be disclosed basically. But when you own a company, you can take a paycheck or a salary for like all of the actual work that you're doing. But then if you're an owner, you can also take profit sharing, which is usually quite a lot more. It's why you see like all these billionaires who are like, my salary's $1 because they just get all of their money via other means, so they don't need to pull an actual salary. So I'm sure he takes a salary and like normal income, but in terms of what he could be getting beyond that, I would imagine it could be up to 50% of the profits. I don't know who else is entitled to get that money outside of Mullvad, but um, could potentially be quite a bit of support.
Yeah, I know this isn't really the point, but just to throw that out there, that's also, it goes the other way too. Sometimes you'll see like, oh, this CEO is making like $15 million a year. And it's like, well, they're actually making less than that. But when you include all the stock options and this, that, and the other, which for the record, they're still making a disgusting amount in, not literally disgusting, but they're still making a crap ton of money in raw liquid cash. But yeah, it's not $15 million in liquid cash. It's like some million in liquid cash, and then the rest is stock options and stuff. But I don't know if Mullvad works the same way, but I digress. So yeah, here's a fun one from Signal again. What were the relevant statements and actions the Mullvad company took to distance themselves from that and prevent it in the future? None, really, to be totally honest. If you read this statement, it very specifically says that like they're I don't even know how to summarize it, to be totally honest, but they didn't condemn it. They didn't endorse it. They just basically said this happened and we don't care and we're just going to keep doing our thing. So
yeah, their position is definitely that they're not going to police what their owners are doing or what their employees are doing or what anyone is doing in their personal time. It's just going to be Mullvad themselves are not going to support things like this, but what people do with the money that they earn from Mullvad is kind of their problem, is Mullvad's position. There's a question on the forum, and Jordan asked a similar question earlier in the chat, so I can kind of cover both of them. Jordan asked if there should be restrictions on executives making political donations to stop this sort of thing. Somebody on the forum thread asked, at what point is it acceptable for an executive or lead developer to support something that could be deemed controversial? At the end of the day, I think all executives of companies that have customers like Mullvad are public figures, whether they like it or not. And so all of the things that they do in their personal lives and the personal choices that they make, they're going to have business impact. And obviously this has had some business impact at Mullvad because they had to speak out about it. And a lot of people are saying that they're canceling because of the co-owner's personal decision here. So, I mean, it's always going to have an impact. At what point is it controversial, or should there be restrictions? It really just depends on the company. I think, it's not unreasonable. I was explaining this on the forum, in the forum thread about this to somebody, but like it is fairly normal when you're dealing with public figures, whether that's an executive of a company or if you're like hiring an actor for a movie or something, to have clauses in their contract or morality clauses that kind of restrict them from doing controversial things like this, because it does have an actual impact on the business itself. It's not just a personal thing. So like that is something that Mullvad could do, but whether they should do that is another question entirely, and it kind of comes down to what the company thinks is an acceptable risk. I mean, it's not like you can mandate this and make it a law or anything. It's just, it comes down to whether Mullvad wants to accept that it's going to have an impact on their business. And it seems clear from their statement that they are just going to accept that as just a fact of life for their business. A similar story, I don't know how many people, maybe not a lot of people know about this, but I've read a lot about it because I've been looking for like merch and stuff for privacy guides, and I see people talking about it on Mastodon. But a lot of people used to really like Sticker Mule for stickers, and then their owner turned out to be a big Trump supporter, so now a lot of people don't want to support that company, mainly based on that. So it's kind of a similar thing where like the personal leanings of the owners of these companies is going to have a significant business impact, whether you or they like it or not. It's just how it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I have much to add to that, because I'm with you in the sense that like I don't really know where that line should be, because on the one part, like they are public figures, and you're right about that stuff, and people are gonna have those reactions either way, right? I mean, like it happens on both sides of the aisle. Look at, Bud Light had like a trans person as their spokesperson at one point, which was really weird, to be honest, for Bud Light. That was definitely off brand for them. But, it happens on both sides of the aisle. But at the same time, it's like, as a person, like I remember when I was in the military, that was the rule there, is like, you don't do anything public, especially in uniform. Like, yeah, go vote, go do whatever. But like, you are not allowed to speak out publicly as a uniformed military member and be like, I support Obama or whatever. So yeah, it's I think that's where this whole, like, I think that's where a lot of the controversy is coming from, is where is the line between, like, this person is an individual who has the right to support whatever ideas they want, even if they're garbage ideas. And, where is the line between that and, like, well, your customers have an expectation of you. And I think you made a really good point that, like, the company definitely depends a lot. I think if you're in, like, if it's like some kind of nonprofit that's like providing legal assistance for immigrants and then they go out and donate a bunch of money to Trump, that would be super weird. But yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
tricky for sure.
Kind of related to that, we had a comment, kind of an opinion from Idher Yu, hopefully I'm saying that somewhat correctly, who said that voting with your wallet is valid for personal ethics, but in threat modeling, prioritizing political alignment over technical robustness is a trade-off. Kind of two things I want to unpack here. The first thing is simple, I think, with VPN companies in particular. We got to understand that these are not zero trust technologies like you're talking about. You do have to trust your VPN provider, and so this kind of thing does come into play because a VPN provider is basically like an ISP. You're just shifting your trust to that VPN. You're not, eliminating the risk involved with an ISP seeing all of your data. That's what we're pretty clear about on our site, is the main use case for a VPN. So if you don't trust the VPN, there's literally no point in using it. And this is a trust question. But when it does come to zero trust things, or things that can be more technically cryptographically proven, I think there is a solid point here. Going back to what I was saying about Graphene OS, for example, or Proton Mail, with these sort of things, there are guarantees. There's inspectability, so people can see what code is running on Graphene OS. It's open source. People can see Proton is using end-to-end encryption, so they can't read all of your messages at rest. That sort of thing is important, and it does eliminate trust. And I think when you can eliminate trust whenever possible, which is ideally how all privacy products would work, then this kind of thing does become less important over time, and it is more of just a personal morals thing at that point. I don't feel that bad about it in this case because there are perfectly good alternative VPN providers you can choose from. We have other recommendations on our site. Whether this is going to cause us to change our recommendations on our site and stop listing Mullvad, I don't think it's going to. And in fact, despite how controversial this topic has been and how many people are posting about it, I haven't seen anybody really suggest that we do that. So, you can definitely separate it a bit. But in the case of a VPN, I do think it's valid to be concerned about this at the very least.
Yeah, on that note, I did want to make sure that we pointed out that not trying to tell people what side they should take, but this is not something that at this point in time we have any reason to believe is impacting Mullvad's actual technical product. So again, going back to that argument of some people are like, I don't care, it's his money, it's his business, the product is solid. The product is still solid as far as we know at this time. And I think that's something worth noting. And kind of related to what you were just asking, somebody in the forum asked, I'd like to know from the staff what they think of Mullvad versus other companies in terms of what they contribute overall. Are they offering unique benefits, not just in their current VPN where we know there are other good options, but in terms of what they'd bring to development, research, privacy advocacy, etc.? And honestly, yeah, kind of. I don't know how I feel about sticking up for Mullvad, because I'll make it clear I don't agree with the policies of this party that he supported. But they ran a huge campaign all around the world to try and bring privacy more to the mainstream. I remember seeing Mullvad buses when I was in Seattle for something last year, and I saw the Mullvad buses and I tried to grab a picture, but they went by too fast. I was like, oh, that's cool, there they are. But they ran this big ad campaign. I think I could be wrong, but I think they've been pretty vocal about being against chat control. They're very I mean, you say research and development, they do a lot of innovative things, in my opinion, like these RAM-only servers, their data service, things like that. So yeah, I think they are really innovative. And actually, there was one other thing I was going to point out. They're not unique. I'm going to share this tab real quick. Jordan brought this to my attention a while back when we were chatting. There's a Medium post after Andy Yen went and made some kind of pro-Trump comments. somebody kind of pointed out, and to me, for the record, I take this post with a little bit of a grain of salt because this person has never posted anything before or since. And but they point out that like Proton has historically donated to a lot of organizations that are not necessarily aligned with stuff like that. And so anyways, my point being is like, yeah, Mullvad is not the only company that's out there donating to good org, or to, I shouldn't say good org. Mullvad's, putting this issue aside, there are other companies that are out there doing good things in the privacy space for advocacy and research and stuff like that. And I wanted to tie that back into what you said with that question. It mentioned like threat modeling. And like, yeah, you could go with, I would feel pretty safe saying that I think Mullvad is probably the best option right now in terms of privacy and security and a VPN. But at the same time, what is your threat model? Like, if your threat model is so high that you cannot afford anything less than Mullvad, you probably shouldn't be using a VPN. You should probably be using Tor or something like that. But Proton is still good. IVPN is still good. Like, I think there are still good options out there where for your threat model, you don't have to sacrifice privacy and security to also still be ideological. So, yeah.
And I will add, though, on the other hand, while there are companies that are doing innovative things just like Mullvad, I think there are probably companies who are doing, or where their like leadership or employees are doing controversial things that you don't know about and haven't heard about. Some of these things are kind of unknowable. And so that's what makes it hard, I think, to base your decisions around this. Like, I mean, now it's kind of proven that if you don't agree with the ethics of the situation, now you have proof that Mullvad is unethical in your eyes. But you can never really prove that a different company is any more ethical than that, because they could be making very similar donations behind the scenes that you just have not heard about. So it's why it's the sort of thing that it's hard to take as a huge factor when you're making like a purchasing decision, for example, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to be too defensive, but I do want to point out Gay Cheese said both sides of the aisle. Bud Light, as we support people, be yourself. The other, for the record, that's not what I meant when I said both sides. What I meant is that both sides do things that alienate their fan base. No, I do not believe that both sides are the same, personally. So I just mean they both do things that alienate people. But I digress. Wow, we spent a lot of time on that story, but that is,
I know.
It's such a complicated story. It's just, and it's, again, I want to reiterate, in my personal opinion, like, I think both arguments are valid. If you're like, Mullvad's the best VPN and you want to stick with it, go for it. But just be aware where your money's going, and vice versa. If you're like, nah, screw these guys, I want to take my money somewhere else, like, I think that's cool too, personally. So, was there anything else we wanted to add to that one before we move on to the next story?
Yeah, let me just look at the questions quick. I don't think there's any remaining that we haven't answered, at least about Mullvad, so we can kind of move on. But if we missed any, or if we missed one in Signal, feel free to send it again and we can look at it. Otherwise, I think it's probably a good time to move on to our next story here. Before I talk about that one, though, I want to go back to some DEF CON questions we had from earlier. Somebody on YouTube, Draken Black Knight, asked about Hope. I'm not going to go to Hope. There are so many conferences that I would like to go to. Carrie Parker from Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons is in the chat and explained why he wouldn't be going, and it's pretty much the same reason for me. That's kind of a lot to be doing right now. But there are a lot of cool conferences to go to, and there's cool ones in Europe that I would like to go to maybe next year. But at the moment, no, I have no other plans for any of that. Somebody else in our Signal chat, and Jordan shared this here, asked if we're doing any kind of meetup at DEF CON. And no, Privacy Guys isn't doing anything at DEF CON. But if anybody does want to meet up, send me a message, because I would love to say hi to people who watch this stream or are familiar with Privacy Guides in any way. So I will be there. I'll be there 6th through the 9th. So yeah, come say hi.
I didn't put two and two together that was about the DEF CON thing. I just saw like, is Privacy Guides doing any kind of meetup? And I'm like, that's kind of out of left field. Why would we be doing a meetup? And At DEF CON, that makes sense.
Yeah, there was a bit more context in the Signal group than than in the chat shared there.
Yeah, I need to add the Signal chat to this computer so I can read it during the streams. I'll have that in time for next week.
All right, I think that's kind of that for now. We'll move on to this story posted by the EFF. The headline is An explosion of surveillance towers is coming to U.S. borders, costing over $1 billion. A new report from the Government Accounting Office reveals that the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, plans to nearly triple the number of surveillance towers along U.S. borders from the current 830 to 2,300 by 2034. EFF says here that the IST program operates autonomous surveillance towers consisting of AI-based systems using radar, thermal, infrared, and optical systems to track targets over long distances, integrated fixed towers, which are optimized for surveilling foot traffic in vehicles, and remote video surveillance systems, which can often be found very close to the border fence in Arizona, including residential neighborhoods where cameras are capable of spying on homes on both sides of the border. They say that DHS expects to purchase more long-range autonomous towers and to upgrade existing towers with autonomous capabilities. The $1 billion comes from the so-called One Big Beautiful Act, a massive tax and spending law that President Trump signed into law in 2025. They point out that the technology isn't exclusive to U.S. federal agencies. It's also deployed by state and local law enforcement, and it's also deployed by governments on the Mexican side. So yeah, a lot to unpack there. Nate, what are you thinking about all that?
Yeah, I think the big thing that stuck out to me, I mean, first of all, I think we kind of wanted to share this because, like, yeah, that's a lot of surveillance towers. I'm assuming they're relatively cheap in the sense that $1 billion probably buys quite a few of them. The thing that stuck out to me is,
I guess we know how many it buys, right? What's the 2,300 minus?
Did they say? Oh yeah, you're right. You're right.
1,470.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that probably includes like install costs and stuff.
Yeah,
but no. So the thing that jumped out at me is I have driven cross country multiple times, and driving through El Paso, like if you're crossing from El Paso to New Mexico or vice versa, is a really wild experience because you can literally look out one window and see this like beautiful, I think it's like a university or something, literally sitting on a hill, and it's huge and it's gorgeous. And then you look to the other side and you can see the what do they call them? The little sheet metal shanty towns in Juarez, literally across the, I'm not kidding. It is a very surreal experience. And I know that in towns like that, where there are towns that literally butt up against the border, some people cross back and forth for work, but a lot of people don't. And my first thought is like, there's no way that these cameras won't be catching people who are just going about their business. You know, it's designed to monitor the border, right? And people crossing the border, but there's no way it's not going to catch the people when the towns are literally that close. It's not going to catch the people driving down the highway, walking their dog, going to school, going to work on their side of the border. Like it's going to catch everybody. And that very much was kind of my first thought of like, there's, I guess the privacy concern is how it, it catches everybody, even if they're not crossing the border.
Yeah. And kind of famously, like the Border Control Agency, they have authority, what is it, like 100 miles inland or something like that? People talk about that when they're talking about like airports all the time, but it's true here too. It's not just like towns that butt up right against the border, right? They can potentially install these quite a ways into the United States, and it could potentially impact a lot of people.
Yeah, I think pretty much any international port, whether that's a border, a seaport, an airport. So yeah, it's honestly, there's not a lot of the US that isn't covered when you expand to that definition. Because there's a lot of like international airports in the middle of the country and stuff like that. So
yeah, I don't know if that legal theory that airports are included has been like tested in court or anything, but like in theory, it's possible. But certainly when we're talking about like a physical border between countries, it's definitely true. So it would apply here.
Yeah, I think the other thing that jumped out to me is, I always want to note that like we just spent 30 minutes talking about a story of nuance. Like there is nuance. Like obviously we want to protect our borders. You know, there are cartels and there are people crossing illegally, and but it's just, I don't know, man. It feels like one of those things where it's like some military general said something about killing a fly with a sledgehammer. It's like it feels like this might be overkill, I think. So yeah, Draken said here that most of the US population lives within that 100-mile buffer zone, which I think is true, actually.
I was just fact checking that, but I believe it is true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So Vonnegut said, sounds like the West Bank, where there's settlements that go right up against refugee camps. And honestly, yeah, it's kind of like that. It's at least the El Paso thing I'm thinking of. It's pretty wild, but
I wonder if
yeah.
I think I don't live in that zone. I think I'm 100 miles away from Canada. I guess I don't I don't know for sure.
I'm pretty sure we live in that zone. I know there is a map I found. I think it was from the ACLU, did a map one time of that 100-mile zone, and it's, yeah, it did not include airports or anything. It was literally just 100 miles around the country, and it's pretty shocking how far in it goes. Now I kind of want to go see if I can find it, but I digress. Yeah, I real quick, I also want to say, I know I'm going to try not to be political because we've already been plenty political enough, but I think there are a lot of people, I mean, we just covered that with this last story where it's like, oh, it's, you know, it's all about the tools, it's all about the encryption, and they kind of ignore the politics, but like, this was directly funded by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So it is kind of important to remember that there are impacts on this stuff, and I would encourage you to try to be politically aware, at least to the extent that you can handle. I know it can be really depressing sometimes, and that, you know, your mental health does matter, but this stuff does have impacts. That's all I'm getting at.
John in the chat said that the Great Lakes are considered part of the border. Yes, that's true. I do think Minneapolis is more than 100 miles away from any of the Great Lakes, if I remember correctly. So I'm pretty sure I am safe, but I'd have to find that map. But definitely if you're in like probably what's around the Great Lakes, Wisconsin, Michigan,
Ohio, Indiana, New York.
That's and
the
especially
entire
the smaller
Northeast,
states.
basically.
Yeah, because like when your state is so small, there's probably, I don't know how like wide all of those states are, but they might not even be 200 miles wide in some cases, and so that's going to cover the entire state, and some of those are quite large because you'd have to, like if you're in Vermont or something, you know, you got the Canadian border on one side, you got the ocean on the other, which is also a border. So that 100 miles goes both ways. So yeah, does not surprise me that 2/3 of Americans live in that zone.
Yeah, I'm trying to find this map. I found an interactive one from ArcGIS. That's kind of cool. Oh, here we go. I think this is the one I was looking at from the ACLU. As soon as it'll load.
Carrie's in the chat saying that he interviewed Nate Wessler, who had some points about that. So I guess we can shill his podcast a bit. Go check out that episode. I'll have to listen to that. I have not caught that one.
I am still way behind. I think I'm still in April on my podcasts. So it's fun though, because it's almost like a little low-key nostalgia. You know, they'll be like, oh, this incident happened in the cyber world, and I'm just like, oh, I remember that. So
I will say, Vonnegut Rosewater said that they haven't seen the Border Patrol officer. Yeah, I mean, I don't really see him except at like the airport. There's probably some like on the actual border of Canada, but it's not like driving from Arizona to Mexico. I've done that once, and there were like border checkpoints and stuff along the way. It's definitely not as much of a thing up north here between the U.S. and Canada as it is by Mexico.
That's actually what I was about to say, is like, I thought you were going to say like, yeah, you don't really see them that often. And I'm like, no, I've, again, driven in the South a lot. I've been through the border checkpoints and
don't see them often here specifically.
Fair.
Which I think kind of removes people from the whole question a bit, because they think like it's not a big deal. But it's a huge thing down there.
It took forever, but I finally found a map. Let me throw this up real quick. Yeah, that's just the coastal border, or like that's not including airports. So I mean, like every major city, Los Angeles, New York, those two are almost like 10% of America's population right there. Miami, Houston, Seattle, Buffalo, Chicago. So fun times.
Yeah.
the entire state of Michigan, the entire state of Maine. Oh man, that sucks. Almost all of California. Man, that sucks. Anyways, yeah, that's a map you can go look at if you do enough digging, I guess. I think let's see here. I'm checking the thread. We're keeping an eye on that as we go. All of Florida, yeah. Delaware.
Yeah, the forum thread had some comments about this news story, but I don't know if there's a question. Let me see here.
Yeah, I didn't see a question, but
yeah, just some more comments about Mullvad.
On that note, though, again, we're trying some new stuff, and one of the things we're going to try is we're going to check in with the forum periodically and see what's going on there. So our forum is always very, very active, and this week has been no exception. Lots of chatter going on there, lots of cool questions and stuff. And this was a question that I had a lot of thoughts on, but I think you did too, because you kind of flagged this one in the show notes. Is there space for another private messaging app? Do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, let me pull it up here.
Sure thing.
This was basically a thread. It was posted a couple days ago asking about whether another privacy related private messaging app is needed, whether this person should build one. And there's a lot of comments about here. A lot of people saying it's probably not the greatest idea, which and I didn't even realize that you posted a comment about this, so you can go into some of the things you were saying after this. But like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, especially with things like the network effect, for example, meaning that everyone has to get on board with a messenger for it to be useful. It's why we kind of tend to only recommend Signal, because it's a net positive if everyone is on this like best all-around messenger instead of using ones that might be like technically better but are less likely for a lot of like average people to use. The main thing I saw is, like, at the beginning of this forum thread, this person said that the biggest walls are infrastructure cost if it becomes popular and getting people to join the network. And I just mainly wanted to say that that second point is like way bigger of a wall than the first point, like massively larger problem. And so if you're only solving the first problem, you're not getting anywhere close to like building a viable messenger. And I think a lot of people, even when presented with perfectly good options, are not going to switch. So yeah, unfortunately, I just cannot encourage going down this path. I think Signal is a very good messenger, obviously. I think if you're very concerned about centralization, I think Simplex is also a good one to look into. And between those, it's kind of hard to imagine why you would use other ones. There are other ones that I'm interested in. Personally, I really like what Delta Chat is doing, but a lot of people, that's a very controversial one on the forum. A lot of people really do not like Delta Chat, which is why we don't like fully recommend it for everyone right now. It's kind of being debated, but like they're at least doing interesting things that I'm following. There's obviously Matrix and other ones that have been around as well. I think like at present we kind of have too many messengers. The problem isn't like needing more messaging software. It's getting people to use messengers that are more private than Telegram and more private than WhatsApp and more private than normal SMS and whatever. So yeah, Nate, maybe you can talk a bit about this post that you wrote here.
Yeah, the messenger thing is one of my pet peeves in the privacy space. I feel like you said, we have too many messengers. And like, for the record, yeah, none of them are perfect. I will give you that. And I think there's even pros and cons, because like Signal, for example, a lot of people are upset that Signal is centralized, and that has come back to bite us before. Like, Signal has on very rare occasions become overwhelmed and crashed. And I think that, I think that's valid, but Signal also makes the point of like, we're centralized because, there's abandoned Matrix servers and Mastodon servers that are like 10 versions out of date and stuff like that. So there's literally pros and cons to everything. And I think my thing, and I kind of went off on a big tangent here, but my thing is I feel like people are focusing, and I feel like this original poster said it really well. Basically, he was like, I'm a software engineer and I've been diving into messaging apps. And to my surprise, it's not that difficult to build a messaging app. So apparently that's why there's 20 billion of them. But the problem is people are focusing on messaging apps too much, in my opinion. And I feel like it's one of those things that, like, it's sexy, it's exciting, it's not hard to do apparently. But, you know, there are so many apps, and I've listed so many here where, like, there are no really good, like, budgeting apps, especially for phone. I know we've got like GNU Cash or something. There's like one calorie counter that looks like it's from 1990. As a married person, I think about things like grocery lists. Like right now, me and my wife have a shared note in Bitwarden that we use as a grocery list, but we don't have an actual dedicated like grocery app where you can check things off as you go. And for the record, like, yeah, you can't make it like a one-to-one replacement with the grocery store's app, because that one will let you do like, here's the exact item and here's the row it's in and here's a picture of it. Like, I'm not expecting it to get that good, but I mentioned, you know, where's a consent-based location tracker so that when the single 95-pound girl goes on a blind date, she can let her best friend track her location for the next 24 hours for safety, which I think somebody did actually post something like that recently. I meant to bookmark it and keep an eye on it. But, you know, I think later on I mentioned some other ideas that, what else have we got out there? I don't know. Maybe I deleted them all. I reworked some of these messages, but and another thing, because I went and I asked my wife, I'm like, I know you have to have opinions on this, and she's not even that into privacy as much as I am. But, you know, it's like, what do you think she's missing? And in her opinion, it's like the appearance of these apps. Like a lot of these apps are very bare bones and they look very dated. And some people don't mind that. Like personally, I don't mind. I think old Firefox was fine. I definitely realized that the new not Firefox, Thunderbird, the old Thunderbird, like, the new one definitely looks better, but I didn't mind the old one. But then there's some things that look really, really dated and really outdated. And, you know, a lot of people want something that looks visually appealing, that captures their attention. And a lot of things nowadays just don't look like that. Like they're designed to be lightweight. And, you know, like, I feel like some people are just so hardcore. Like if you add one extra line of code that doesn't need to be there, now all of a sudden it's bloated and it's completely unusable. But the looks do really matter for some people in the user interface. And I think just making things, bringing them into the 21st century and making them look good and making sure they're updated. Like some things just never really get updates, which, I mean, granted, you know, things for like a note-taking app probably doesn't need to be updated that often. But again, if we had one that looked modern and stuff like that. So I don't know. That's kind of what I would focus on. Is I think we already have too many messengers, and I would like to see people dedicate their attention to other things that look good, that work well, that have the features we need. I think we need more options in those spaces, personally. So yeah, I kind of went on a couple of posts about that, but hopefully I wasn't too rude.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that kind of sums up the forum thread. I'll take a quick aside, look at some comments in the chat again. Yo, Fred Kong. Welcome to the stream. Eder, you said, thanks for addressing the comments and having the debate. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also, we can't spend like hours and hours talking about Mullvad, right? But a lot of these discussions we also have on the forum pretty often, and I would say if people have follow-up questions or want to continue posting about it, go into the forum, discuss.privacyguides.net. It's a great way to discuss all of this stuff if we can't discuss it all live here on the show. But of course, we're happy to answer any questions that we get here. So yeah, keep sending them in, everybody.
Yeah. I know Anon said there are good apps out there. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there are, and some of them are hard to find, but they're getting better. But like one of the examples I use that I really like is like Enti. You know, Enti has that really cute, it has like the duck logo and it's like really user friendly and it looks good. And it's got all the features that the normal people want, but they're all opt in. Like you can enable machine learning that's done on device. So you can search photos, and, you know, if you don't want it, you just don't turn it on. And you can have the memories that, you know, on this day 5 years ago, and you can have the like all kinds of cool stuff. Like I think Enti is a really good example of what I'm looking for, but I don't know. I'm sure there are some good apps. I'm just saying, instead of making a messenger, make literally anything else, because we need more other stuff. So, yeah, I think if that's all we got, we can move on to this next story.
Yeah, do you mind if we do site updates now and then go to that story? feel like, I
Yeah,
mean, we're an
sure.
hour in. Let's get some stuff to talk about. Before
That's fair.
before we talk about yet another border story we have, let's go over some quick updates that of what we've been working on at Privacy Guys this week. We finally were able to publish a new site update, so we have the changelog there. A lot of things have been updated. A lot of these have been published on the site for a while, but they weren't like released to the web server, so they weren't live. And now, now they are. So everything should be up to date. We're also working on some stuff. So I'm working on new recommendations for security keys, kind of changing that up, and also recommending cryptocurrency hardware wallets. I have literally so many of them on my desk now, just messing with them. And we're discussing those on the forum. So there's a lot of forum threads about that. If you have opinions about cryptocurrency hardware wallets or security keys, you can go to GitHub. There's a pull request open that's a draft right now. I think it's just titled hardware keys, security keys. And in that pull request, there's links to all of the forum threads because there's like 5 different forum threads about different things that are being added. So, yeah, if you have opinions, definitely let us know, obviously. But that is something that'll be coming soon. In other news, FRIA continues to publish news articles, privacyguides.org/news. Nate has also, of course, published the weekly data breach roundup. So there's all sorts of stuff out there for you to stay up to date with. We try to post some of the biggest stories that we see, especially ones that we can't talk about here on the show, on that page throughout the week. So that is a good place to stay informed in addition to the news category on our forum. A couple other things we're discussing. I think the only other thing we're considering right now is a new nested reply format for the forum. There's a sticky post on the forum right now called defaulting new post to use nested replies. It's kind of a Reddit-like format for posts. Right now, we're definitely not going to be switching to it. I'll just tell you because it is kind of buggy in some ways, and there's some improvements that I want to make that I've shared with the discourse team to see if they decide to implement any of them. However, I mean, assuming it does work, I think that there's probably some reasons we might want to use it, at least for some threads in the future. So if you want to check it out, see what it will probably look like and how it works, and see, let us know about any feedback you have. Definitely check out that thread because in some ways I like it a lot, but I'm a big like Reddit user, and there's a lot of ways that the current forum system is also very nice as well. So a lot to think about there. I think that's kind of it in terms of site updates and things I'm involved with. Nate, why don't you talk about some of the video stuff that you and Jordan have been doing?
Yeah, unfortunately, Jordan got sick this week. So they are recovering, and they were hoping to have the next video done by now, but things happen. Health is more important, obviously. So once they recover, they'll be wrapping that one up. And yeah, I mean, I've already got one video filmed after that, and just reached out to somebody today about an interview, which I am excited about. I don't think anybody has had an interview quite like this one. Maybe Carrie in the like 10 years he's been doing Firewalls, No Stop Dragons, but I think it's going to be a good one, and I'm excited to share that with you guys. But that's kind of all we've got going on right now. So,
Sweet.
yeah, all this is made possible by our supporters. So if you want to help support our work, you can sign up for a membership or donate at privacyguides.org/donate. We also still do have the merch shop that Jonah mentioned earlier, shop.privacyguides.org. Privacy Guides is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy-related information and facilitates a community on our forum and Matrix where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. Before we jump into that, actually, we did get a couple of questions. We got one. I don't want to say off topic. We got a question in the forum that is not related to any of the stories we've covered so far. Khaled says, what are some good ways to spread disinformation about yourself? I've heard this talked about in the past to protect against data brokers and other places, but don't know what's the best way. Do you have any thoughts on that one? I use a little bit of disinformation. I don't know if you do.
This is a good question. Good ways to spread it is is hard because, I mean, like, whenever possible, it's good to use fake information when you can, or to use like email aliases and stuff like that so things can't be tied together. And so, like, if data does get released in like data breaches or whatever, it won't be accurate information. But like intentionally sharing false information, I have definitely heard people talking about this. I don't really do this myself, so maybe you can talk a bit more about it. But I've always leaned towards more just kind of trying to eliminate as much as possible from being out there, whether that's through data broker removal services or just putting out minimal information out there in the first place or what have you. Um, so I guess I don't, I guess the answer is I don't really know the best way to go about this, but it is an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, I don't know if I know the best way because I'm kind of with you. I focus more on like removing the data that's out there. But I will say that so like one of the things I do is I am really militant about using a PO box. And that has worked so well that I know for a fact that in the past LexisNexis has thought that was my actual address. Which is funny because I'm not even like going that hard to like, oh, I don't put my real name on my lease or whatever, and somehow still fooled the data brokers. Um, yeah, Drake in here said best way is to lie about your birthday, city where you live, etc. Yeah, I mean, little things like that. Like if I buy anything that's not going to a PO box, I try to use like a hotel downtown or library or something as my mailing address. Um, LinkedIn, I know I've said this before. When I got into privacy, there was a specific address that kept showing up on all these people search sites that was like 10 years out of date. And I could not figure out where it was coming from until I realized I had a LinkedIn account I had never deleted and never really used. And that's where it was coming from. So yeah, sign up for LinkedIn and put the wrong information on there and it'll get out in about 10 minutes. I'm trying to think what else. I've heard that rewards cards, like signing up for, it kind of depends on what you want to do. Like some people, this mostly comes from Michael Basil, but he's recommended like get magazines shipped to your house in the wrong name. Some post office people are kind of militant about not delivering mail that's not like, if they know that name doesn't go to that address, they won't deliver it because they think it's wrong. So some people have had that experience. You could sign up for again, like rewards cards at the grocery store using the wrong name but your actual phone number, like things like that. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's kind of a subtle mix of things of just kind of figuring out where, does this person need this information? And if they don't, what information can I give them instead? Especially if it's required. Like a lot of the time, if you go to buy something online, sometimes it won't say, it won't, like the phone number will be optional, but then other times it will require a phone number. And at that point, it's like, okay, you're never going to call me. So what fake phone number can I put there? Things like that, I think, are kind of how I think about it. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of all I got on that one. It's more of an art than a science, I think, and just kind of looking for those opportunities. But
Sweet. Well, let's move on. Why don't you cover this next story also from EFF here?
yeah, so this one is a little bit disappointing, unfortunately. And it says that the Fourth Circuit says border agents can search your phone by hand, no suspicion required. So for those who don't know, here in the US, borders or searches of your phone are really kind of a legal gray area that are kind of, it's kind of patchwork, I guess I would say. It's very like at this place this rule applies, but at this place this rule applies, and here you need a warrant but here you don't, blah blah blah, and it's very confusing. And so basically there was a case called US versus Belmont Cardozo, who unfortunately does not seem like he was a cool guy. Seems like he had CSAM on his phone, according to some stuff later down here. But either way, they tried to argue as a defense that the police should have gotten a warrant to look through his phone, and this made it up to the circuit court, which I forget how circuits work. I think a circuit includes several states. Like it's kind of like a regional court, I think, if I remember correctly. Okay. But yeah, so the this went up to the Fourth Circuit, who decided that border agents are allowed to search your phone without a warrant or really any reason, as long as it's a quick manual search. So again, there's I don't want to get too bogged down in the weeds of context here, but basically there's different reasons that people can perform cops, I should say, can perform searches. There is, like going and getting a warrant, but obviously if we assume good faith, there are still times where it makes sense that like they can't get a warrant. Like if they're at the airport and somebody's acting real shady and their suitcase is oversized or whatever, like they've got some reason that like something suspicious is going on here, then if they can prove, if this ends up going to court or whatever, and they can prove to the judge, like, no, here's why I flagged this guy and here's why I thought this was suspicious, then that evidence is allowed in court. And there are certain things, according to the EFF, that at the border, you don't even need a reason. You don't even need to say, like, this is suspicious. It's just, you can do this search. And as an example, they gave, like, your luggage. Even if there's nothing suspicious, even if there's no evidence of wrongdoing, the cops can be like, I'm going to search your luggage, which they do even on domestic flights. I can tell you that from experience. And so basically the court has said cops are allowed to do a search for any reason, without a warrant, without any suspicion, without any probable cause, as long as it's a quick manual search. And where did it go here? So they said that it has to be a person, not a machine. They said that the breadth of the search depends on the officer's time and energy. While forensic searches are comprehensive, manual searches only reveal what a user can typically access, while forensic searches can uncover deleted files, cache fragments, metadata, and more. And manual searches are subject to an officer's fading memory or imperfect notes, while forensic searches create a permanent copy. So basically, this is not permission for them to hook your phone up and run Celebrite and copy your data. It's, the cop saying at the border, like, let me see your phone, unlock your phone, and looking through your phone. And EFF argues, and I think most of us watching would agree, that that's still not really great, because your phone is so much more sensitive than like even your luggage. Like, okay, sure, your luggage might have some stuff you don't necessarily want everybody seeing, but your phone has your messages, your photos, your banking apps, Grinder, like religious apps, like whatever it is. Like your phone has so much more data than your luggage would. And it's so much easier, at least in my opinion, it is so much easier when you're packing your luggage to, like even as a real example, like when you're packing your luggage, you can choose to leave out things that you don't want to put in there, but you might still have like medication reminders on your phone or like a doctor's app or something like that. And it's just, yeah, the EFF was basically like, this is really not the same. And it's kind of disappointing that there's no real actual anything. Again, they don't even need suspicion. They can just go ahead and say, here's all the, here, I don't know. I'm tripping over my words, but I think I've kind of made my point there. It's really disappointing. Unfortunately, I will say at the end here, they did point out that in this particular case, the search only lasted 2 minutes, which means that there's a possibility that even if it is a manual search, if it goes on longer, it could require a more in-depth search. So like if this guy took the phone and just opened photos real quick and saw CSAM, then it's like, okay, you're under arrest. But if he's like sitting there with your phone for 10 minutes, like reading every single message and checking your browser history, it's like, come on, man, you got to be a little more reasonable. So I think that's probably the good thing. But I don't know.
I don't understand I don't understand how a time limit would work, but I don't know. I'd have to look more into that. I wanted to go back to the reason that you said Belmont Cardozo was arrested, because I think this is it's an important point to remember that I think people need to realize when we talk about cases like this. Obviously, he was arrested in this case for having CSAM, which led to his arrest and criminal prosecution. And I think when we see court cases like this, what you have to remember is that the things that are happening in this court case are almost certainly things that the government does all the time. Like, this isn't the first time that they've done it and now they're trying it in court. This happens, and if it gets challenged in court, which a lot of people probably won't even do in the first place, but if it does, if it's not as controversial as this, where like he has CSAM on his phone, the US government is just going to drop it because they want these court cases to create precedent for them to do this sort of thing in the future. And so they have to find the most extreme possible case that they can find because they want to use, illegitimate reasons, I think, to kind of justify this instead of looking at the letter of the law as it is right now and realizing that this sort of search is illegal under the Constitution, but they want people to overlook that because of the nature of the crime in this case. And I just think that's important for people to remember, because a lot of people do get outraged about this, and they'll see stories like this and they will say, like, well, yeah, we want to catch people like that. But how many, criminals is the government letting go before we can get to a court case like this? And also, how many times has the government done this before, before it reached any court at all, and before it was challenged? Probably quite a bit. They're just invading people's privacy illegally, and often it doesn't get policed at all. So yeah, I think I just wanted to remind people that keep it in mind when you read stories like this, because I think people get too caught up in what the crime was instead of what the government is doing. And remember that we kind of have a duty to police the police officers and make sure that this sort of thing isn't happening and isn't legal. Yeah, because that's my main point. I don't know if there's anything else I wanted to add. You kind of covered a lot.
Sorry, I mean, it's kind of a straightforward story, but I also wanted to include it because, like I said, this, the rules surrounding phone searches, it feels like they're changing by the day, and it's highly contextual and dependent on things. And so it's the more information we can get about how to what's going on and what the current landscape is helpful.
And also, like, both this story and the previous story about the border we just did, it's another thing sort of similar to what I was saying about the government, where, like, the government is doing these things on the border specifically because they know that people get really mad about border-related issues and will support things that they otherwise wouldn't support in any other context. So that's why we see a lot of very extreme stories, like ones dealing with CSIM, and that's why I think we talk about a lot of border stories, like a disproportionate amount on this show, because that is, it kind of seems like, in my opinion, where the government wants to test out a lot of these privacy invasive things first before we see them get that out on the streets everywhere in America. I think that, I mean, really, like the stuff we were talking about on the border in terms of surveillance towers, that's the sort of thing that they wanted to test on the border, and now we see flock cameras on every street corner in America. It's kind of a pared down, cheaper version of all of that surveillance stuff, but it's more ubiquitous, and it's not about protecting the border. It's about surveilling American citizens, and everywhere they go and what they're doing. So yeah, you just gotta keep all of that in mind. It's all like, this has more impact than just like the specific thing that we're looking at right now.
You may have heard of this, but it does not get as much attention as his other phrase in shittification. But have you heard of Cory Doctorow's shitty tech adoption curve?
No, I have not heard that.
It's basically what you're arguing. Do you remember that Winter Soldier drone that Baltimore tried to roll out, like, sometime shortly after lockdown, I think?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
For those who maybe missed that story, basically Baltimore, the city of Baltimore, I think it was Baltimore, wanted to fly a surveillance drone like 24/7 in the sky that would just record all the time. And, civil rights groups fought back, and they were like, this is surveillance. This is illegal. This is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And real quick, as I thought it was funny, they tried to argue, it's like, well, it's not really 24/7 surveillance because we still have to land it for a couple hours a night to refuel it and stuff. So technically it doesn't get, and thankfully the government was like, no, this is illegal. You can't do this. So they weren't allowed to do it. But somebody pointed out that technology began in Afghanistan. Like, it was literally a modified version of the Predator drones and the same surveillance drone we fly around in war zones. And Cory Doctorow coined this term called the shitty tech adoption curve, which is exactly what you're saying, is like they roll it out in these situations where, unfortunately, people aren't really paying attention, in like wars and prisons and places like that, where it's easier for people to ignore it. And then they kind of use that as a testing ground to hone the technology before rolling it out to surveil the rest of us. And unfortunately, ever since I read that, I see it everywhere. Cory was very, very right about that. But yeah, that's basically what you were describing. So
I know I can never have an original thought. Cory's had all of them already. Cory has all of the thoughts.
Dude, he is so smart. I mean, yeah, none of us can compete with him.
No.
But, I think before we dive into the next story, I think we had another forum post we wanted to look at, and I think this one actually came from you about the FCC comment.
Sorry. Yeah,
I,
trying to pull it up again. Yeah, I did just want to highlight this really quick. The we I think did you talk about it on the show? I don't think I was on, but I'm sure in one episode it came up.
I think we gave it a brief mention because this does ring a
Yeah,
bell.
the FCC is proposing a plan to require government ID, your physical address, and an alternative phone number for every phone line in the U.S. So, yeah, if you sign up for a new phone line, you're not going to be able to get it as anonymously as you currently can. We've talked about a number of ways to get phone lines anonymously here on the channel, and I'm not really sure how any of those methods would really survive a rule change like this. The deadline to comment on these proposals is July 25th. And so if you are an American, I think it is really important to submit a comment to the FCC about this because they will take this into account in these hearings, especially genuine personal accounts are going to be very compelling in terms of pushing back against this. Don't just submit like an AI generated comment, but you can go to this forum post that I've stickied it on the forum, so you should be able to find it because I have a link to where you can file an express comment and the two docket numbers that you're going to enter in the top field of that. You're going to enter 17-59 and 02-278. And just submit a comment for both of those. You can do both of them on the same form, so it's very easy to do. And I think it's very important that this sort of thing doesn't get passed. So hopefully you can speak out about it. There are some comments in this forum thread that we could address here. Expert 4870 asked if KYC would help with spam. And the answer is no. None of this is going to help with spam in any way, because this isn't the reason that spam calls exist. Spam calls currently mainly exist due to technical failings of these telecom providers, and there are systems in place, or they could make systems that would prevent pretty much all of this stuff from happening. They just choose not to do it for a variety of reasons. But there are different like authentication protocols, and there are technical ways that they could just prevent cell phone number spoofing, which would be a huge improvement that they're not doing. And it's not clear to me how KYC is going to help this because all of those exploits and flaws in the current telecom system will still exist for spammers to take advantage of. However, this is going to make it much, much harder for regular people to get phone lines, which are pretty much mandatory given how many services require a phone number nowadays. So, yeah, this is definitely not the solution. All of the expert opinions that I've seen on this and all of the people in the telecom space that I've talked to have no idea how this is going to improve the spam situation either, because it's not. But yeah, and also as Carrie just pointed out, it doesn't prevent offshore phone accounts. Yeah, like this really, I can't even imagine how they are justifying that this could solve the problem that they're trying to address, because there are so many ways for all of that stuff to continue while this policy is in place to really take away privacy from Americans. So just wanted to put that out there. Check out the forum thread. I can leave it in the chat here if people want to check it out. But
It's also in the newsletter.
oh, it'll be in the newsletter. It's on the site. You can go to the forum, discuss.privacyguys.net. It'll be at the top. So I think that'll be, yeah, consider it, because public opposition, and especially like grassroots opposition, does actually have an impact on these political decisions. We've talked about that before, like in the EU with chat control and like pushing back against that. And it's the same here, where we got to nip this in the bud before it happens, because if it happens, it's going to be so hard to undo it.
Yeah, I haven't clicked on this link, but I said the same thing in the forum that that Carrie kind of hinted at, which is a lot of spam callers come from outside the U.S. and they spoof U.S. phone numbers, and Somebody replied to me and said that they quoted this link here. The commission further proposes to require voice service providers to implement measures to ensure that consumers know which calls originate from outside the U.S. and to prohibit spoofing of U.S. telephone numbers for calls that originate from outside the U.S. Again, I didn't click the full link, but I'm assuming it doesn't say how they're supposed to do that. And to me, this strikes me as one of those things that it's like, do you think they don't want to do that? Like, do you think they're not already trying? Like, everyone hates spam. They already don't want these spam calls. Like, I don't know. It sounds to me like one of those things where it's just the politicians that don't understand how to check their email on their iPhone are telling us just nerd harder and find a solution. And it's like this just, yeah, I don't see how this is supposed to actually solve anything other than just creating a bunch of like legal liability that's just going to make everything worse. And I think the first time we covered this, we mentioned like this is going to kill like whistleblowers, journalists, which I'm sure the current political landscape would be thrilled about all that. Domestic abuse survivors, like all these kind of people that have perfectly legitimate cases for needing a burner phone are just up a creek now. And we're not actually going to fix everything. We're just going to make everything worse for everybody. So yeah, I need to leave a comment on this too.
Before we move on to the next story, I want to grab another question in the chat here. VPN question. If I change my VPN server regularly, a few times a day or more often, does it strengthen my privacy or not significantly? Thanks. This is really going to depend on who you want privacy from, but in general, I wouldn't recommend doing this. It could possibly make sense to do this if you're visiting different websites and you're like using one VPN on one website and a different VPN with a different one. But if you're just rotating VPNs constantly and using the same sites, this is probably going to have little impact, and this will make you less private on like your local network, for example, because it's just more fingerprintable. But when you're doing things that are kind of out of the norm, especially like manual things and things that aren't like built-in features, you're pretty much just standing out from other users who are not doing that. And so typically it is best for privacy, as a general rule, to not take things into your own hands and implement additional security measures if it hasn't been like fully proven that this is going to improve your privacy in some way. I think that's just a good philosophy in general, which is like the less you can do, the better. And this sounds like a lot of extra work for no proven gains. So yeah, I wouldn't do this probably, but I think that answers that.
Yeah, I just want to add on that in general, I think VPNs are really over exaggerated for privacy. I think somebody commented this during the Mullvad story too. And, they have a place. Like I use a VPN. I'm sure Jonah does. Like most people do use VPNs because they're helpful. But, VPNs really only do two things. They change your IP address. And aside from, three things, because they also do the whole encrypted connection thing. If you use, most modern VPNs nowadays come with DNS-based blockers that block ads and trackers and malware. But, the DNS-based things, they're only going to block known things, right? And they're only going to block DNS-based. So, like, if your ads and trackers are being served from the same place as the website itself, they can't block that without breaking the website. If it's, a new web address, a new domain, they can't block that because they don't know about it yet. And as far as the IP address thing, like I'm firmly convinced we don't actually know how common fingerprinting is because companies, don't really rush to tell the world. And those who do are marketing companies, so they're probably over exaggerating it anyways. But I'm willing to bet that fingerprinting is extremely common nowadays. And in the context of fingerprinting, your IP address is such a small part of your fingerprint because a lot of residential places rotate IP addresses anyways. And, if you're going from your phone to your computer to the library to the coffee shop to work, like IP address is just not a very efficient way to track people. So VPNs, I'm not anti-VPN, but I don't think in the context of privacy, like I'm with Jonah, I think rotating regularly would just be so much overkill for so little gain. And I think you'd be better off just focusing on using a good privacy respecting browser, using things like uBlock Origin that are not blocking purely based off block lists. Things like that, I think are going to get you way, way more privacy than rotating VPNs. So, alrighty. On that note, I think we're going to move on to our next story about OpenAI. This is kind of a big story this week, the whole OpenAI and Hugging Face debacle.
Yeah, this is reported by Wired. OpenAI models escaped containment and hacked Hugging Face. Describing the incident as unprecedented, OpenAI said its AI models broke out of a sealed testing environment last week and hacked into Hugging Face's production system to steal the answers to a test they were being graded on. The models, the publicly available GPT 5.6 Sol and an unreleased reportedly more capable one, were being evaluated on their offensive hacking skills with the safeguards that normally block high-risk cyber activity switched off. They go on to say, according to OpenAI and Hugging Face, the models escaped through a package registry cache proxy software that allows developers to install outside code without connecting to the internet. The proxy was the only component in OpenAI's isolated testing environment permitted to reach the outside world. In normal use, that reach extends only to public code repositories. Rather than stay contained in the sandbox, the models exploited a zero-day vulnerability to gain access to the open internet as they hyper-focused on finding a solution for the AI cybersecurity benchmark known as Exploitgem. Such experiments involve prompting that pressures the models to find solutions, essentially egging them on. They say that the flaw that the models exploited was previously unknown, as would be implied because it's a zero-day exploit, but flaws in this kind of software are not unusual. Companies have been patching serious vulnerabilities in artifact repositories for a decade. A bug disclosed in 2024 let anyone who could reach the server ask for a file by URL and get it, which would include configuration files, passwords, access tokens without logging in. Others have let attackers take control of the server itself. So a lot to unpack there. I kind of take a little issue with a lot of these stories about AI and security and like their capabilities because honestly, like when Anthropic's Claude Fable was banned by the US government, we talked about that a few weeks ago when it happened. And I kind of had a similar opinion then, which is that like all these stories do is really boost the impression that like these models are extremely capable and they're totally worth paying a lot of money for because look what they can do, right? But at the same time, it is true that they're finding like zero-day vulnerabilities and they're discovering new vulnerabilities that didn't previously exist, and there obviously are cybersecurity implications there. Yeah, Nate, I could talk a bit more about this, but do you have any thoughts, or was there anything you saw in the article that I didn't talk about?
Not too many. I think I think your take is definitely accurate that this is kind of a little bit marketing for these companies, like, oh, look how super powerful our AI model is. But it does also kind of point out that I think it's one of those, it's kind of like when Kerry guested on the podcast and he said, like, this stuff is coming, like, regardless of how you feel about AI. I think there are um some impacts here that are happening regardless of whether you use it or not. Because, I think when we think about agentic AI, at least me, I usually think of stories about like, oh, some moron's AI agent went and erased their entire inbox. And it's just like, yeah, what idiot is using these things to begin with? But now we're seeing it's like it can go beyond that, and it's unfortunate that it's one of those things where I think as privacy people, we all kind of relate to, people will be like, well, if you don't like Google, just don't use it. And it's like Google Analytics is on 70% of websites. How am I supposed to just not use that? Like, come on, man. And it's kind of the same thing where like now they're starting to use these AI agents for like pen testing and hacking. And it's like, how am I just supposed to not use it when this is impacting me? And another thing that occurred to me was, we covered a story a couple episodes ago. I think I forgot to go find that episode, but we covered a story a while back about how with the Mythos thing, I think it may have been the episode Carrie was on, where there were unauthorized users that were somehow gaining access to Mythos, and I don't think they ever resolved how that was happening, whether it was like some kind of insider giving them access or something. But it kind of points out that it's really delusional with all these tech companies. You know, it's like, oh, only the good guys are going to have this. We're only going to sell it to good guys, which is definitely what Clearview AI said right before selling it to authoritarian regimes. But it's also like, even if they are acting in good faith, clearly these people are finding access somehow. And yeah, I think the last thing I wrote down here is kind of towards the end of the article, they talked about how this is really an infrastructure problem. Let me see if I can go find it. In recent months, top AI companies have been raising concerns about the expanding cybersecurity capabilities of upcoming frontier models as the platforms increase in both expertise, creativity, and agentic autonomous operation. But researchers emphasize that this is all the more reason the fundamentals should still apply. Where was it? It was like the last quote that he made. I wish this is a veteran security engineer and researcher, Niels Provost. He says, I wish the Frontier Lab spent as much time on teaching their models to write secure infrastructure as they are spending on exploiting vulnerabilities. And it's just kind of showing that whole like move fast and break things mentality is still here. They're still out there just trying to make money, trying to like push out this newest, shiniest model. Like you were saying, it's, look how scary our model is. And it's unfortunate that we do not ever seem to learn our lesson and we just keep repeating these mistakes.
Well, and that quote is especially relevant here because when I'm reading this, I'm wondering, like, how was this vulnerability found? What was the vulnerability? And was there like a more standard configuration for this proxy server that would have prevented them from doing this? Maybe if they had configured it differently when they installed it, because I would have to imagine OpenAI probably is just asking AI to set up this secure environment and to set up this proxy server. Like, I'm sure they use AI super heavily. And so the idea that like, oh, these models should be taught more about like doing things securely in the first place rather than spending so much time like exploiting vulnerabilities, which again, I think is mainly a marketing thing. It's much more, I guess, clickbaity to say like OpenAI hacked this thing versus OpenAI made security improvements to this open source software or something like that. So unfortunately, I think like a lot of it is very attention driven. This sort of story creates a lot of attention for OpenAI. Obviously, we're talking about it now, so it's working. And that attention is like the main thing that these companies need right now, like just to survive. They're obviously not making money. So they have to exist on hype and vibes alone until, in theory they can make money. I don't know if they ever will, but that's their hope. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have much more to say beyond that. The AI stuff is just nuts to me.
Yeah, I don't really know if I have any more to add either. I agree with you. It's it does make me wonder what you were saying about like, did they have the AI configure this? It's I mean, if you have the AI spit out code, you're just gonna skim it. You're not gonna sit there and audit every single line of code. You're just gonna like, yeah, it looks good, let's run it. And as opposed to like, if a human wrote the code, I mean, maybe the human would just by instinct write it in a much more secure way, but since it looks mostly right, they don't catch it when the AI does it. And I don't know.
Yeah, I just can't imagine like anyone at OpenAI is really just doing things on their own anymore. Like that would be unbelievable to me. I
don't know, man.
They're
Don't
probably
get
not
high on
even
your own
like
supply.
yeah, hopefully they're not, but I would imagine they have not taken that advice to heart.
Yeah, who knows? We had one more forum update that we were going to cover before jumping into our final story about Apple. This one was pretty close to my heart. Is there a point in supporting projects? I don't know whose turn it is. Is this my turn?
You can take it.
Do you want to take this one? Okay. So yeah, this person here says that this is something that's been on their mind for a little bit. And basically, is there a point in supporting small projects? And they talked about Session, for example. And they say that, they want to support projects and they're happy that they exist, but at the same time, does it actually matter? If you give $5 a month, does that help? And, they might still go bankrupt or disappear. How do I know they won't go into financial trouble? So on and so forth. So here's my take based on my experiences with the new oil, with surveillance report, and a little bit here at Privacy Guides is a little bit different than what I was doing at those organizations. But I think so. The first thing that I want to reiterate that we always say is like, your safety comes first. We don't want you to donate if you're gonna lose your house, if you're not gonna have money for food or for the baby formula or whatever. Definitely take care of yourself first. But if you have disposable income, I think I actually wrote a big long response here, and I mentioned that at New Oil and Surveillance Report, depending on when you measure and how, only 1% to 5% of people donated money. And I've said many, many times in the past that if half of the people who visited the New Oil donated $1, I could have been doing privacy full time years ago. And so I think a lot of the time, like, yeah, if you look at it as an individual, like donating $5, $10, even $1 as an individual, yeah, is really not going to do anything. But it's almost like like this is a problem we have with voting, right? Where a lot of people are like, oh, my vote doesn't count, and therefore 40% of America doesn't vote. And it's like those millions of votes could have potentially changed the outcome of the election, any election, either way. And so it's kind of the same issue in privacy, where it's like, if everybody goes, yeah, well, my $5, all I have is $1, that doesn't help. Yes, but if 1,000 people give $1 a month, that's $1,000. Like it adds up. And so I would encourage people, and obviously I have incentive, but I would encourage people that, yeah, if you do have money, donate. And there are so many projects out there, for the record. I know it's kind of impossible to donate to all of them. So I would recommend starting with the ones that, like, if this went away tomorrow, could you live without it? Like, I use Signal religiously. I use now I use Fresh Tomato, but I used to use DDWRT and like Nextcloud, and like these are all things that if they went away tomorrow, like, yeah, I'd be kind of screwed. Things like another thing that's really common is rotating. This month I'm going to give $5 to Signal. Next month I'm going to give $5 to Fresh Tomato. Next month I'm going to give $5 to Cubes, like that kind of thing. So I don't know. This is really near and dear to my heart. It definitely, if you do have a disposable income, I strongly encourage people to donate, because it does help. It adds up. Even $1. Like I said, if 1,000 people give $1, that's $1,000 a month. So yeah, I don't know if I can add much more to that without repeating myself.
Yeah. It's hard to say. I think people are bummed when they support projects that like eventually do go under or can't continue running. You need a lot of money to do all of these things, and some projects tend to get like all of it, and then most of them don't. But I think the first reply on this forum thread is a pretty good point, which is just they basically said like there's a fairly strong chance that if no one donates, then there's going to be fewer projects available overall. You're kind of I guess you're sort of betting on like which ones are going to succeed, and sometimes you're going to lose those bets. But if you can support all of these projects, the more you do, the more likely it is that one of them will make a big difference. And I think if nobody is supporting like the small tiny projects, then there will never be any new ones, because it'll just be too hard to get it off the ground. So yeah, I definitely tell you all for sure that probably not as many people donate to Privacy Guides as you would think, so we can always use donations as well. But there's a ton of projects to support, and I can't remember if we do this currently. I should look. I feel like, yeah, for a lot of our recommendations on our site, if they have like a donation option, we have a button to hit where that'll link like directly to their contribution page, so you can find like where to support all the projects that you use if you search for the tool on our site. So that could be something to look into. But I definitely would recommend supporting anything that you use. And just think of it like, if you're using it now and you like it, and you can afford it, you should pay for it. I think, yeah, if it goes away, and if it disappears, it's a shame. But then you can just move on to supporting something else, and hopefully, it doesn't go away.
I think it's also one thing I wrote in my comment here is, this should be disposable income. Like, this should be money that is not going to, keep your kid out of college or something. And the example I use is like, I'm a sugar addict. I finished a Mountain Dew right before we started recording. You know, I love sugar. I'm constantly buying like fraps and sodas and all kinds of sugary stuff. And those things cost, you know, $2, $5, depending on what I get and where I'm at. And they last me what, a couple hours tops. And then even the high of the sugar rush eventually goes, or not sugar rush, but you know, the dopamine hit of the sugar eventually goes away too. And so it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'm spending $5 and it's going to last me half a day tops. The convenient, or not the convenient, the reward of that, whatever word I'm looking for. And, you know, whereas something like this, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, if I knew for sure that skipping one coffee a month would keep Signal around, would I do it? Yeah, absolutely. And so it's, to me, it's kind of that same argument. It's like trying to reframe that attitude of like I can afford to go without one soda to help this project stay around, I think. And yeah, you know, Carrie said it too, the diffusion of responsibility. A lot of people assume that other people are supporting, like you said, it's, you know, I was surprised, real quick, one more quick story. I went to the Cubes, what is it, like Open Collective one time, and their annual budget is like $10,000. And I'm like, hold on, what? Cubes? There's like 7 developers, and literally not a single one of them could afford to do this full time. And they put out an amazing operating system. Like, they're probably making a lot less than you think. So
yeah, I was going to point out that exact same comment from Carrie, because that is the case when I talk to people about like privacy guides as well, and mainly like people who are thinking about donating, and they're asking about like how everything works currently. And I think there's generally surprise about like how much we're getting, because they assume that we would be getting a lot more, which I think is absolutely just a thing. I didn't know that it had a name, diffusion of responsibility phenomenon. So now I know this thanks to Carrie. But I think that's absolutely a thing with a lot of these projects. It's very easy to assume that somebody else is supporting them, so you don't have to. It's exactly the same as like, this is classic 911 first responder advice. Like, you have to be like, don't just say like, somebody call 911. You have to say like, you, pink shirt right there, call 911 right now if you're in an emergency situation, because otherwise nobody will do it, because nobody wants to do things. So I'm telling all of you right now, you watching this, donate to something.
You with the face.
Yeah.
One more example. If you go to nt.com/open, they share how many customers they have and how much revenue. They only make like $1 million a year, which for a company providing that kind of infrastructure, that blew my mind when I read that. I'm like, that's it? Like, I've historically always worked for companies that made way more than that, and they were still small companies. Like, I can't believe Ente is running on such a small budget. But
I mean, now you don't work for a company making more than that.
Yes, that's why I said historically. This might be the first company I've ever worked for that makes less than $1 million a year. But just to point out the example, yeah, like what we were saying is like, people think that they make a lot more money than they do. And when I saw that from Ente, I was like, really? That's it? Like, yeah, it's wild. They're doing a lot for how little they're making. But anyways, that's all I had on that one.
Yeah. Terracotta Pie just said, late, thanks for the response. You're certainly welcome. Again, ask questions, everyone, in the chat, because we will try and get to them.
In the meantime, we're going to talk about Apple and how Apple has finally fixed a vulnerability in Hide My Email after being shamed by 404 Media, because sometimes that is what it takes. So we did cover this. I actually went and looked it up. We covered this on episode 60 when Calyx OS came back. It was our second story, it looks like. So if you want to hear the original coverage, you can go back and check that out. But long story short, Apple says it has fixed a vulnerability in their Hide My Email feature, which let essentially anyone figure out a user's real email address, which was supposed to be protected by the feature. It's literally your one job. So they knew about it for about a year. And for those who don't know, Hide My Email is exactly what it sounds like. It's a paid feature, and it lets you create a new masked email address when you sign up for something that still forwards to your main email address. So that way, if it gets caught up with spam, you can just turn it off or whatever, and you won't keep getting spam. Or they point out here, hackers can also have a harder time cross-referencing your various accounts. So Tyler Murphy, co-founder of Easy Opt-outs, which is a service we do recommend. It is a service that I personally have been using for years, and I love it. He discovered this vulnerability and tried to report it to Apple. Apple I think if I remember the original story, Apple started to reply and, kind of started to work with him and then just kind of ghosted him and stopped responding. And at that point, Murphy came to 404. 404 published a story, and now that Apple was shamed, they had to go ahead and respond again. They said that it was fixed. And at the time, 404 was not disclosing how it worked because, of course, it's like they haven't fixed it yet. Anybody could do this. But now we have some information. And to put it simply, it required sending a target and a message that gets rejected as spam, and you purposely want it to get rejected. They said, we don't know how often hidden email addresses were leaked in email logs. For many major email hosts, the leak was triggered simply by an email being automatically rejected. Even if it was legitimate, such emails probably didn't make it to your inbox, so you can't review your spam folder to learn whether you were affected, which is kind of scary. But yeah, basically, when it got rejected, the mail transfer logs could contain the hidden email address, your original email address, which would be exposed to the attacker. I think they have a link to Tyler's blog post explaining this stuff potentially. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, I guess that's kind of what's going on here now that we know more about how it works. Not much of the story, just kind of a little tiny little bit of good news to end on. I want to bring Jonah in to fact check me on this one, but I did a little bit of very, very rudimentary research, and I think it is potentially possible that people like Simple Login and Addy might be vulnerable to this, depending on how they handle spam rejections. Do you know anything about that, or is that just pure speculation on my part?
There's not a lot of like details about how this works exactly. I'd have to look more into it, because I suppose this is probably more dependent on like how your not the aliasing provider, but how your mailbox provider handles messages that are sent to spam. I would hope that they don't, that would get reported to the aliasing provider instead of the person who sent it, which it sounds like is probably the case with Apple, but I actually don't know how that works, or how this vulnerability bug works.
It actually is. If you go to easyoptouts.com, there's a little banner right at the top that says "See our statement about Apple's Hide My Email vulnerability." It is a 20-minute read, so we probably can't read it here. But it looks like he does go into detail. If you scroll down to the exploit. So interesting. So yeah, we might look into that. Here, I'm going to share it while you're looking at this.
Okay, it does say that hidden email addresses were leaked for a variety of mail hosts, so they saw them not just for iCloud, which is one thing I was wondering. I don't really understand why Apple's servers would do this, which is probably what Easy Opt does and everyone else doesn't understand. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I doubt this is an issue. They do say in this post, there's an other email aliasing services section, and they tested this vulnerability against many of the aliasing services on the market, according to them, and none of them had the same kinds of vulnerabilities. I assume at minimum they tested Simple Login and Addy, because those are like the two main ones people typically look at. But
oh, I see they have a how to tell if you're affected section here.
Yeah, so I guess you can test it. I guess we could test it. But yeah, I can't imagine why Apple servers would be configured in that way. It really does sound like a specific to Apple problem.
Yeah, I think you're right. I see the section here now where it says we did limited testing against many of the major aliasing services on the market, none of the ones we tested. And yeah, Simple Login and Addy are definitely two of the biggest ones. So at least Simple Login, I would imagine, was probably tested here. But if nothing else, hopefully now those providers are aware of this and they can go test themselves and make sure they're not configured like this. So.
Yeah, it's always a shame that these companies have to be kind of pressured into fixing obvious problems, but at least it's fixed for everyone using this.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't know why they have to drag their feet so much, but I digress. Um, yeah, I was gonna say the last note that I had written down here is we still do recommend services like Simple Login and Addy over Apple because for one, they're more transparent. You know, they're open source. I think you can even self-host Simple Login for sure, maybe even Addy, and lack of vendor lock-in. You know, if one day you wake up and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna move to Graphene. Like, guess what? You're not locked into Apple if you go with something like Simple Login. So, yeah. Um, but that's I think all I had.
Yeah, taking what maybe a look at our final chats here. In Signal, somebody commented about the FCC thing. I'm also informed in our Signal chat just during the show. Speaking of donations, that Cape has sent a donation to Privacy Guides. I don't know anything about that, but I'll have to look into that. But thank you to Cape for donating. Hopefully we get other donations too. But yeah, I will have to check into that after the show.
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, every little bit adds up. It really does. Even if it's
Yeah.
just $1 a month. If like years ago, last time I checked, you guys used to have the umami analytics on the website publicly.
Mhm.
And I remember checking one time out of curiosity, and it was literally like 100,000 visitors a month. And it's like literally if half that number gave $1 a month, like I'm sure that would go so far.
That'd be sweet. If all of them did, then we'd finally be that $1 million revenue. Yeah, we don't need nearly that much money, but we could. There's definitely improvements that could be made. I think I just wanted to, now that you mentioned it, kind of look at our stats on like the form, and I think we get. I mean, we get millions of page views. I don't know if I can see how many individual people visit, but whatever.
And that's another thing I think about a lot too is like, you know, with umami, it's like it's kind of privacy respecting analytics. So it's like how many of those are individual and how many of those just have a different fingerprint now because they're browser or whatever. So
yeah.
It's hard to say for sure, but I mean, it's still a lot. So
that's why you track visits and page views.
We did get a question just now from username 549. There are a few offline privacy-focused navigation apps, but none seem to have a good interface. Do you think it is important to stay away from Google Maps, or is the privacy concern insignificant? I mean, in my opinion, I think I would still have one of those as a backup in case you ever lose signal or something like that, which I've been in those situations where just the cell signal's not very good and I'm kind of screwed. But from a privacy perspective, if I'm being honest, I think it really depends on where you're going and how often. Like if you know how to get around town and you're only ever using Google Maps like once a month or once every other month when you're going somewhere new, then it's probably not that big a deal. And especially if you're just like, oh, I'm checking out a new restaurant or something. But if you're using it like constantly, like I used to use it at my last job, I was constantly working on different job sites, and because we were on the clock and we were usually going there during rush hour, I was constantly trying to find the fastest route. So I really relied on mostly Apple Maps because I had an iPhone at the time. And but I was using it like every day, all the time to get to and from places just to skip traffic. And that was probably not great for privacy, but I was on the clock. What am I going to do? So I don't know. That's kind of my take. I think it depends on how often you're using it and what for.
So your answer is kind of like, how much do you want to be tracked by the Maps
I mean, pretty much,
app?
yeah.
Yeah. That is kind of what it comes down to, isn't it?
But yeah. Do you satisfy your curiosity about the analytics?
It's kind of complicated. We had a weird spike in visitors on the 16th for some reason. I wonder why that was.
Dude, I get the same thing on mine. I'm really genuinely convinced it might be like AI scraping because it'll literally go from like a couple hundred visitors a day to like 10,000 visitors at 4 a.m. on a Tuesday, and then it'll drop back down, and it's just like something fishy's going on there.
What did we do on the 16th though? I mean, the weird thing is it stayed, that was the peak, but it stayed pretty high for like the week following that on this graph. I have no idea why that would be.
I don't have a calendar open in front of me, so that is a good question.
Anyways,
Think we want
Yeah.
to close this out, or you got anything else you want to add?
I'm not seeing anything on Signal or the forum. So did you did you see that the news about Codeberg banning cryptocurrency projects?
I skimmed it briefly. I saw the forum post about it and something about, you said it was what was your wording? It was extraordinarily poorly worded.
Well, I just don't understand it. I guess I don't have much to say about it, but it seems like they're saying two different things, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but just a weird thing I've saw on the forum lately.
Is it just they're basically just bamming scammy crypto products?
Well, yeah, I mean, like in this banner at the top of their page, they just say cryptocurrency projects are no longer allowed, and that's also what it says on their terms of service. But then, like, in a random comment on this thread about the change, they explain that it's only scammy ones, which is not what it says. But I guess if you go down and read this random comment, you would know which ones are allowed and which ones aren't.
Interesting. I wonder if
Yeah.
it's one of the, what do they call that? Like a silent policy?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it'll just be enforced probably arbitrarily, which is probably not how I would prefer the services that I use operate. Codeberg kind of annoys me sometimes. It's one of the reasons I don't want to switch to it. I know people ask us that all the time, and I don't really like Codeberg or GitLab more than. I mean, I like him like just a little more than GitHub, but not enough to switch off of GitHub. But I do like Codeberg software. I would love for Joe to get to the point where we could switch to it. But I really wish it had Federation, and that's taking a really long time. So sadly, I don't know. I mean, can't complain about it too much. I don't know how to speed it up, so but it just is.
I'm sure that ActivityPub is not necessarily perfect for everything, but I do really like the idea of like so many different services being ActivityPub compatible, because then you've got this this ideal scenario where it's like I can comment on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, GitHub, all these different things from one account, and I don't need to keep making accounts if I don't want to. And like that is probably one of my favorite things about the Fediverse.
And it's like I hope they can do it soon. It feels like it actually wouldn't be that complicated for this use case because Git is already decentralized. So you pretty much only have to federate like issues and stars, and pull requests is probably the hardest one, but like Git already has ways to work on things remotely and on different branches, and you can just pull it in from a different site. So it feels like it wouldn't be extraordinarily difficult. Like it's basically just comments and reactions is the main thing, which is already done by every single ActivityPub platform out there. That's how they work. It's comments and posts, right? But you know, I mean, I'm obviously not coding it, so I can't provide too much input or complain about it too much because I'm not going to do it myself. I can tell you that.
Fair enough.
I think that's kind of it then. So, yeah, I think you can wrap it up. Nate, you're muted.
I hit the button too many times. My bad. All right. All the updates from This Week in Privacy will be shared on the blog every week, so sign up for the newsletter or subscribe with your favorite RSS reader if you want to stay tuned. For people who prefer audio, we also offer a podcast available on all platforms and RSS, and this video will be synced to PeerTube. Privacy Guides is an impartial nonprofit organization that focuses on building a strong privacy advocacy community and delivering the best digital privacy and consumer technology rights advice on the internet. If you want to support our mission, then you can make a donation on our website, privacyguides.org. To make a donation, you can click the red heart icon located in the top right corner of the page. You could also just go to privacyguides.org/donate, and you can contribute using standard fiat currency via debit or credit card, or opt to donate anonymously using Monero or your favorite cryptocurrency. Becoming a paid member unlocks exclusive perks like early access to video content, priority during the live stream Q&A. You'll also get a cool badge on your profile in the forum and the warm, fuzzy feeling of supporting independent media. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week.